Hi everyone, today I want to show you a card that I've made with the Gather Together stamp set. I really love fall, and all the fall colors and fall stamp sets really attract my attention, and I loved the wheat in this stamp here as well as everything else really. And so I thought I would use it, and you can barely tell that I've used the stamp set on this card. It was inspired by a painting that I did. I love to paint, and I sometimes follow some watercolor tutorials, and there's one called Let's Make Art that I follow, and we made this wheat field. And so I thought it was fun, and I wanted to kind of recreate it in a card, but something that would be able to be mass-produced fast. And you know, I had to color each, or paint each little wheat stalk on that painting, so here I can do it in a much faster way when I use my stamps. So it was a fun card, and I thought I would make a video on how to put it all together. So I start with a piece of watercolor paper, and the measurements here are 5 by 3 3/4. And the first thing I like to do is tape it down. So I use washi tape. It's something that I have on hand easily, and I like that I can kind of see through it so that I can see how big of a margin I gave myself around the image, the paper. And normally I tape it down to a clipboard, and I can't find my clipboard today. I think the children have borrowed it and failed to put it back where they found it. Okay, now I like to kind of go over that to make sure it sticks down tight. Okay, all right, let me move the stamp set. The next thing I did is I cut myself a little circle just to kind of give myself a place to hold down for my sun that's either setting or rising. I'm not sure if it's setting or rising, but this is a 1-inch circle, and I just punched it out of a scrap piece of watercolor paper that I had laying around. The colors that we're going to use are So Saffron, Crushed Curry, Pumpkin Pie, Cajun Craze, and then Early Espresso is just for the sentiment. We're going to start with the So Saffron. Now this is one of the older style stamp pads, and to get ink in the lid you can simply squeeze and you'll get a little ink in the top of your lid, and that is what I like to use for my palette. I also like to keep a Stampin' Scrub on hand. This is where I rinse my brush and change colors. Now I'm using one of my favorite tools in the catalog. It's the Aqua Painters, or they're now called Water Painters. And they're nice little brushes, and this time they come with a wide brush as well as 2 round tips. And I really like that they've added this wide wash brush to the collection. I use it a lot. So first I'm going to squeeze the barrel a little bit. There's just water in here, and I'm going to let a little water come down onto the bristles. And then I'm going to grab some of this So Saffron, and I'm going to wash it across the background. Okay, that's it for that. And normally you wouldn't have to necessarily wait for it to dry before adding the next layer if you're doing a different variant wash, like different color gradients. But I want it to be dry so that I can add my little circle, this here. So I'm going to give it a minute, and through the magic of video you won't know that time has passed at all. Alright, now we're going to grab the Crushed Curry. This is pretty dry. Now this one is one of the newer pads, and I don't like to really squeeze them. They're a little, perfect and tight, and I don't want to accidentally crack it. So I am going to add ink directly to the lid. If I can find my Crushed Curry. Now I'm just going to take that little circle and kind of hold it in place while I go over this with my crushed curry layer. Now, it is going to maybe bleed a little bit underneath, but it doesn't have to be precise. It's kind of like a shady sky. It's pretty good. But if you want to define it a little more, you can take some of your ink and just kind of go around it. There you go. So if you decide that your circle is kind of messed up, I messed up one of mine when I was going around it, I decided to dry brush some streaks across the whole sky, and I thought that that kind of could look like a hazy sky, maybe some clouds, and they're glowing against the yellow of the sun. So that's what these little stripes are. And so you can do that if you find that your sun is a little messed up. I think it's fine. I'm not picky. So now I'm going to add pumpkin pie. And this is still wet. I don't have to dry in between anymore. I don't know what that is. So we're going to add the pumpkin pie kind of on the bottom fourth, maybe. Like so. And then I'm going to add the tiniest bit of Cajun Craze. And now it's pretty wet actually, because I've done several layers and I didn't bother drying between. So you can see that it's bleeding upward, and I kind of like that. And if you wanted to, you could even kind of tilt your paper up a little bit and allow it to kind of bleed. And it'll give you some nice little striations that might show through on your, behind your wheat field. Kind of looks like more stalks. If you wanted to do that. Okay, so now I'm going to clean my brush. Now my bottom half here is very wet. Okay. So I'm going to let it sit for a minute before we do our stamping on top. So while I'm waiting, I'll stamp my greeting, and you can do, you know, whatever greeting you like. I try to stick with one stamp set when I'm working with a stamp set, but I have a so glad to have you in my life and a wishing you well, and I thought I might do a simple thank you. So I've got a piece of watercolor paper left over from when I trimmed my card. This is 3/4 of an inch wide, and I just grabbed a thank you. I have a million thank yous. This one is from, let's see, Love of Leaves. It's actually quite small. I might look for a bigger one. Although I can make this smaller. I think I'll do that. Hopefully I haven't made it too small. It is now 1/2 inch instead of 3/4 of an inch. Smeared it a little bit. Luckily there's 2 sides to every piece of paper. Okay. I'll let that dry. You know, when you stamp on watercolor paper, it tends to sometimes smear, so the ink stays on top for just a second longer than regular. So I'm going to let it go to the side, and we'll bring this back. Okay. Now it's okay if this is a little bit wet, but you don't want it sopping wet for this next part. So I'm going to go ahead and take my stamp from the Gather Together stamp set, and I'm going to grab the crushed curry. Again, I'm done with my watercolor. And it's still a little damp, so it's going to bleed a little bit, but not a lot. And I'm going to stamp some wheat kind of going around, and you kind of want to tilt some in different ways. And you can only see the tips because we're going to do another layer on top, so I don't mind that none of this is showing down here. That's okay. So I'm just doing a little bit of the golden color. And now we need our crushed, or our Cajun craze. And this time, clean my stamp. This time we're going to mist the stamp after we put ink on it because we kind of do want it to be wet. So I've put my Cajun craze on. You want some that are not misted because you want to get that wheat detail on a few of them. And you want to tilt, you want to get stalks at different heights and different angles like that. If your paper is still wet enough that it smears a little bit, that might be okay. But if not, what you're going to do is you're going to grab a spritzer of some kind. This is the Stampin' Spritzers. They're really nice because they're small. They make a real fine mist and they're inexpensive. So I'm going to mist away from my paper so you won't see it, but I'm just going to give it one little mist. Oops. So it's just a little bit wet, and I'm going to go like that, and it's going to help it kind of bleed in a little bit. So I'm going to do that again. And move it around. And again. I think we've got it. Now, just to make sure that there's no little odd V-shaped areas of blank, I'm going to go over that a little bit. Okay. So now this has to dry. So I'm going to use my heat tool to dry. I don't like to do that when I'm going in between layers because it tends to make the washi tape separate from my nice smooth surface here, so I don't usually use the heat tool. But now I'm done with all my stamping, so I'm going to grab the heat tool. Let me clean my stamp. Okay, I think the watercolor paper is pretty dry, but the washi tape may not be, so be careful when you're taking the washi tape off your project. One thing I also want to say about taking the washi tape off, when you do, you're going to want to pull it away from the project, and that's because in case a part sticks, sometimes it sticks and it will rip the paper, and you don't want it to rip the paper into your project. You want to rip away from your project, because if you do end up getting some bleed, you can trim that, but if you have a big rip, then you can't. Alright, so I did get a nice clean edge. I really like that. If you didn't and you have to trim, that's okay. You can always add another matte layer behind your cardstock here, maybe very vanilla, or you can go with a pumpkin pie layer, something like that. I didn't get a clean cut edge here, so I might fix that before I trim it. Don't you love this little paper trimmer? This was something that was a promotion a while back and demonstrators can still get. It's cute, cute little thing. I just wanted to take off just tiniest little sliver there. Now it's nice and clean. Okay, so here we go. That is my background. And now I'm just going to mount that onto a piece of early espresso. Now here you can add some more creativity with what you want to do behind your greeting. And you can also decide where you want your greeting to go based on how well your painting turned out. Sometimes there's a little area that we want to hide, and so you might want to put your greeting at the top or the bottom. I put a lot of adhesive behind my watercolor paper because it does buckle a little bit, and that way it helps it stay flat. Okay, now for this one, I've got my little thank you, which is pretty tiny, so I think I might go ahead and put it at the bottom, and that way I can use some more of these fun little wheat stalks. I cut a ton of the little wheat stalks out for a swap that I did, so I probably have several left over. I think I cut out, I don't know, 50 or so. I just kept cutting and cutting and cutting, and then I really wasn't counting, and then I only needed probably 30. Anyway. As soon as I started trimming this, I realized, you know, we do have a punch that makes this exact shape. So I don't know why I just grabbed my scissors, but I kind of tend to do that. Okay, there is my little end. And then, where's my bag of cutouts? Ah, yes. Okay, so I've got these little wheat stalks. And I can use those if I trim them down. Now this is from the Autumn Essentials dies, and I'm going to show you them because they're really awesome. They have 3 different little wheat stalks in them, but also these really fun pumpkins and these really fun borders. I love the dies these days. I think that they really do a great job with the accent dies, and this one is great for all things autumn. These pumpkins are fantastic. You can put a solid pumpkin behind and then a different color pumpkin, or maybe a metallic pumpkin on top. Just all kinds of things you can do with these pumpkins, and I love these borders. Aren't they sweet? I don't need them for this particular card, but I really like them. There's another die set that has kind of a wheat stalk looking piece as well, and it's the sunflower dies. There's a couple little stalks that look similar to this in that one as well. They don't have the little flyaways, which I like. Okay, so I'm going to put these down. I'm going to have to trim them. So I'm just going to use a little bit of the liquid glue here. Put a little bit behind the stalk. And then my thank you will go right on top. Now, do I also want to put a little twine bow? Let's try it. When you make these, no two are going to be alike. It's kind of fun to see what happens and, you know, how your colors turn out. This one had a ton of bleed in the background. I didn't let it dry quite so much. This one didn't have very much bleed in the background. I did a lot more dry brush. So you kind of just have to play with it and have fun. So I just doubled up my linen thread so that I would get kind of a thicker bow here. Yeah, I like it. Okay, so I need a glue dot maybe. Actually, maybe sometimes I've been putting the bow underneath, but I think this time I'll put the bow in the corner. So I did leave myself enough room for that. It's tiny. There. Okay, and then I'm going to stick the whole thing on some dimensionals. Okay, so here are my sunny wheat fields. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope you'll give it a try. These water painters are so much fun and so easy to use, and when you combine them with stamps, you can make something that looks like a painting, but you just stamped it. Really fun. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll come back again and subscribe. Bye.